The church clock read 10:27 when I knew something was wrong. Not wrong in a dramatic way. Not yet. Just wrong in the quiet way your body senses before your mind catches up. The air felt heavier than it should have. The kind of weight that presses down on your shoulders without asking permission. Guests filled the pews. Polished shoes tapping marble floors, soft laughter mixing with the low hum of the city outside. Car horns echoed faintly through stained glass windows. Somewhere, a siren wailed and then faded. Like it already knew it wouldn't matter today. I stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit that still smelled faintly of the dry cleaner. My palms were damp. My jaw ached from holding a smile that had started to feel borrowed. A photographer circled like a patient hawk, waiting for the moment that would make the album worth the price. My best man leaned in close and whispered something about how lucky I was. I nodded, because that's what men do when the script says nod. The music was supposed to start 5 minutes ago. I checked my watch. Then I checked my phone. Nothing. No message. No missed call. No last-minute nerves joke. Just a silent screen reflecting my own face back at me. Pale, focused, still believing. People say weddings are about love. But that morning felt more like a performance. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew their marks. I had spent months convincing myself that certainty was the same as trust. That if you planned enough, if you worked hard enough, if you stayed loyal enough, things would hold. That belief would not survive the hour. The pastor cleared his throat, gave me a look that said we were drifting off schedule. My mother sat in the second row, dabbing at her eyes already, smiling at me like this was the happiest moment of her life. She didn't know yet. No one did. Not even me. Not fully. A flashback hit, without warning. 3 years earlier, a crowded diner near 5th Street. Late-night coffee, greasy fries, and a conversation that lasted until sunrise. That was how it started. Two people talking like the city couldn't hear them. Promises made casually, then taken seriously. Moving in together. Sunday mornings, with pancakes and burnt bacon. Arguments about money. Arguments about time. Arguments about things neither of us could name but both of us felt. I pushed the memory away as footsteps echoed near the back of the church. Everyone turned. My heart jumped once. Hard enough to hurt. But it wasn't her. Just a late guest slipping into a pew, embarrassed, head down. A few people laughed softly. The moment passed. The weight did not another vibration in my pocket. This time real. I pulled my phone out slowly, like it might explode if I moved too fast. One message. No emojis. No explanation. No apology wrapped in soft words. Just a sentence. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, hoping the meaning would change if I stared long enough. It didn't. My chest tightened. Not in a movie way. In a real way. The kind that steals air and replaces it with heat. The kind that makes your ears ring while the world keeps moving like nothing happened. I didn't collapse. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I stood there, at the altar. Alone, behind me, the city kept breathing. Outside, traffic lights changed. Somewhere, someone ordered a cheeseburger and fries. Life continued, unaware it had just split mine in two. The pastor stepped closer, confusion written across his face. My best man whispered my name, this time with panic in it. I looked out at the crowd, friends, co-workers, relatives, people who had taken time off work to witness a promise they would never see fulfilled. In that moment, something inside me broke quietly, not loudly enough for anyone to hear, but completely enough to change everything that came after. Asterisk, the church emptied slower than it should have. People didn't rush out. They hovered, whispered, pretended to check their phones while sneaking looks in my direction. Sympathy is loud even when no one says a word. I could feel it crawling over my skin, heavy and uncomfortable. My mother was the first to reach me. She touched my arm like I might shatter if she gripped too hard. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. All sound had dulled, like the world had wrapped itself in cotton. Someone suggested water. Someone else suggested stepping outside. My best man stood there helpless, guilt written all over his face, as if this were somehow his fault. I nodded at everything. I followed directions. I did what men do when they don't know how to fall apart in public. Outside. The city hit me full force. The street in front of the church was alive, ride shares pulling up. Horns blaring, pedestrians weaving between cars. A street vendor pushed a cart loaded with hot dogs and pretzels, mustard bottles rattling with every step. The smell of grilled onions twisted my stomach. It was too normal. Too ordinary for a day that had just burned itself into my memory. A reporter stood across the street. Not for me yet. At least not yet. But I saw how easily a story could form. A wedding gone wrong. A groom left standing. The kind of headline people scroll past while eating lunch. That thought made my chest tighten again. I got into the back seat of a car I didn't remember ordering. The driver asked where to? I gave my address out of habit, then immediately regretted it. Home wasn't going to be home anymore. It was just a place full of her things, her scent still on the pillows, her favorite mug sitting in the sink like a quiet accusation. The ride blurred. Buildings passed. Billboards advertised luxury condos and fast food deals. Life lessons disguised as slogans. I stared out the window and replayed the message in my head, like maybe there was something hidden between the words. Some code I missed. Some sign I ignored flashed back 2 months earlier. A rooftop bar downtown. She laughed when I spilled beer on my jacket. Said it was a good sign, me being imperfect. I remember the way she looked at the skyline, lights reflecting in her eyes. I remember thinking how lucky I was. How solid everything felt. That memory cut deeper now, because it proved something painful. She had known before I did. When the car stopped, I didn't move right away. The driver glanced back, unsure. I handed him cash and stepped out, standing on the sidewalk like I'd never seen the building before. The doorman avoided my eyes. News travels fast in cities. Shame travels faster. Inside the apartment, silence waited. No music. No television. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic outside. Her shoes were still by the door. Her coat hung on the hook. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, still in my suit, tie loosened. Heart pounding for no reason other than habit. That was when the calls started. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives. Everyone wanted to know what happened. Everyone wanted details. I let the phone ring until the screen went dark. Then it lit up again. And again. Each vibration felt like a reminder that this wasn't a bad dream. This was a public failure, unfolding in real time. Social media did the rest. By evening, my name was circulating in group chats I didn't belong to. Someone had posted a blurry photo from the church steps, me standing there alone, jacket over my arm, staring at the ground. Captions ranged from sympathetic to cruel. People who barely knew me suddenly had opinions about my worth, my choices, my masculinity. That night, I ordered takeout I couldn't taste. A burger, fries, and a soda that went flat while I stared at the wall. Food felt like a chore. Breathing did too. I slept in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at the altar. Back at the moment before the message arrived. Back when hope was still intact. Around 3 a.m, I sat up in bed and laughed, once short and bitter. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative felt worse. That was the first night I realized something important. The pain wasn't just about being left. It was about being replaced. In my own life, and somewhere beneath the shock, beneath the embarrassment, beneath the raw, aching loss, a quieter emotion began to form, one I didn't recognize yet, but would come to know very well. It was anger, not the loud kind, the patient kind. Anger doesn't arrive with fireworks. It seeps in. It shows up when the sympathy fades and the casseroles stop coming. When people stop checking in because they assume you're doing better now, and your phone stays quiet long enough for your thoughts to get loud. That's when anger settles in and starts rearranging the furniture in your head. The first week after the wedding, that wasn't. I barely left the apartment. I called in sick to work, then stopped calling altogether. I watched daytime television without knowing what was on. I scrolled endlessly, punishing myself with old photos, old messages, old promises that now felt like jokes told at my expense. She still hadn't explained. No call. No long text. No attempt to soften the damage. Just that single message, sitting in my phone like a scar that refused to fade. Every hour that passed without explanation felt intentional. Like silence was the final statement. Flashback, a late argument, 6 months before the wedding, money stress, long hours. I had accused her of drifting. She accused me of being obsessed with stability, with planning, with control. She said she felt like she was suffocating. I told her we were building something real. She went quiet after that. I thought we'd resolved it. I was wrong by the second week. Isolation stopped feeling protective and started feeling dangerous. So I forced myself outside. Early mornings, before the city fully woke up, I walked past closed storefronts, neon signs still buzzing from the night before. The sidewalk smelled like rain and last night's fries. Delivery trucks rumbled by, drivers sipping coffee, unaware they were passing a man trying to learn how to exist again. I found a gym 2 blocks away, nothing fancy. Old equipment, peeling paint. The kind of place where nobody cares about your story. That was the point. I signed up without thinking. First day, I lasted 15 minutes. My lungs burned. My arms shook. Sweat soaked through my shirt like a confession. I came back the next day anyway. Routine became my anchor. Wake up early. Train hard. Shower. Eat something simple: eggs, toast, black coffee. No alcohol. No late nights. No replaying conversations that were already dead. The discipline didn't fix the pain, but it gave it somewhere to go. Work called. I returned. Not because I felt ready, but because bills don't care about heartbreak. My boss didn't mention the wedding. He just handed me a new project with a tight deadline. I took it like a challenge. Focus felt good. Numbers made sense when emotions didn't. People at the office watched me carefully, like I might snap. I didn't. I smiled. I showed up early. I stayed late. Pride can be a powerful fuel when it's all you have left. One night, about a month in, I ran into someone who knew her. Not a close friend. More like a social overlap. We stood outside a pizza place. The smell of pepperoni thick in the air. City lights reflecting off wet pavement. He hesitated before speaking, then said, "I didn't know how to tell you, but she's not as surprised as you think." That sentence stayed with me. Not as surprised. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want rumors. But it confirmed something my instincts had been whispering. The ending had been rehearsed. I was the only one reading from the old script. That night I sat alone in my apartment and finally took the ring off. I set it on the table and stared at it for a long time. It felt heavier than it should have. A symbol of commitment turned into proof of misjudgment. I didn't throw it away. I put it in a drawer, not out of sentimentality. But as a reminder, weeks passed. My body changed. My face sharpened. The mirror started reflecting Zameen I recognized, again tired. Yes, but steadier, stronger. The city stopped feeling hostile and started feeling neutral. Just a place. Just streets and lights and endless motion. And then, without warning, the past knocked an email. Short, careful, polite. She wanted to talk, said. She owed me an explanation. I stared at the screen. Heart pounding, anger flaring, curiosity creeping in behind it. This was the moment I had imagined 100 times. The apology. The confession. The closure. I didn't reply right away because something had shifted. I wasn't desperate for answers anymore. I was deciding whether she deserved access to the man I was becoming. Asterisk. Waited 3 days before responding, not to punish her, not to play games. I waited because I needed to be sure the reply came from clarity, not craving, from self-respect, not old attachment. When I finally typed back, it was one sentence, neutral, controlled. I agreed to meet. We chose a public place. A cafe downtown wedged between a gym and a co-working space. Glass walls. Clean lines. The smell of roasted coffee beans and toasted bagels. Safe territory. No memories attached. I arrived early. Old habit. I ordered black coffee and took a seat near the window, watching pedestrians pass, people with headphones, people arguing on phones, people carrying groceries like the weight of daily life never stops. I felt strangely calm. The version of me who once rehearsed conversations in his head until 3 in the morning was gone. She walked in exactly on time for a split second. Muscle memory kicked in. My chest tightened. My eyes traced familiar lines. Same posture, same walk. But something was different. Not bad. Just off. Like a song played at the wrong speed. She smiled carefully, unsure of her welcome. I stood, nodded, sat back down. No hug, no small talk. We ordered. She barely touched her food. I finished my coffee. "I owe you an explanation," she said finally, voice steady but thin. I didn't respond. Silence can be an invitation or a warning. I let her choose. She talked about pressure, about expectations, about feeling like she was stepping into a life that wasn't hers anymore, about waking up weeks before the wedding with a pit in her stomach and convincing herself it was normal fear, about meeting someone who made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. There it was. Not shouted, not dramatic. Just placed gently on the table like a bill I hadn't agreed to pay. I listened. Not because I needed the details, but because I wanted to see if she took responsibility or hid behind language. She did both. Humans rarely do just one. Flashback a night I stayed late at work, chasing a deadline. She ate dinner alone. I remembered brushing off her frustration, telling myself success required sacrifice. That memory hit harder now. Not as blame, but as context. Relationships don't usually end at the altar. They end in 1,000 small moments people ignore. She reached for my hand. I pulled mine back, not angrily. Calmly, "I didn't come here to be convinced," I said. My voice surprised even me. It was firm, grounded. "I came because you asked." Her eyes filled. She apologized. For the timing, for the humiliation, for disappearing instead of facing the consequences. She said she never meant to hurt me like that. Intent doesn't erase impact. Outside, a delivery truck honked. A barista laughed at something behind the counter. Life kept moving, indifferent to our reckoning. When she finished, I leaned back and studied her, not with bitterness. With distance. "You don't owe me a better story," I said. "You owed me honesty before it cost everyone else." She nodded. Tears slid down her face. I didn't reach for a napkin. We sat there a moment longer, two people at the end of a shared road. I realized then that closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you take when you stop asking why and start asking what's next. As I stood to leave, she said my name. I paused. She asked if there was any chance, any possibility that we could talk again someday. Not about getting back together, just talking. I thought about the man I had been standing at the altar, the man who believed loyalty alone could hold everything together. Then I thought about the man who woke up early now, who trained, who focused, who rebuilt quietly while the city slept. "I don't think that would be fair," I said, "to either of us." I left first. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because forgiveness had happened, but because truth had finally landed where it belonged. I walked several blocks before realizing something important. Well, I wasn't angry anymore. The meeting hadn't reopened the wound. It had sealed it, and as the city lights came on one by one, reflected in glass and asphalt, a thought settled and clear, undeniable, and heavy with promise. This chapter hadn't ended my story. It had cleared the ground for what came next. The city doesn't notice when you decide to change. There's no announcement, no countdown. Just mornings that start earlier than before, and nights that end without excuses. I leaned into that anonymity. It was easier to grow when no one was watching. Work became sharper. I took on projects others avoided, tight deadlines, high pressure, real stakes, the kind that either expose you or elevate you. I volunteered for presentations. I learned the language of influence, of negotiation, of staying calm when money and reputations were on the line. Results followed. Promotions don't always come with applause, but they come with leverage. Outside the office, I rebuilt my circle. Not many people. Just the right ones. A coworker who trained with me at dawn. A neighbor who understood silence better than advice. Old friends who didn't treat me like a tragedy. We shared meals that felt earned steak after a long week. Burgers after late workouts. Coffee that tasted better because it followed discipline. Flashback the wedding registry. Fancy plates we never opened. A blender still boxed in the closet. One night, I donated everything. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Space matters. So does symbolism. My body continued to change, but more importantly, my posture did. I walked differently, slower, more deliberate. Confidence isn't loud. It's efficient. People noticed, but they didn't know why. They asked questions in indirect ways. I answered with work, not explanations. Opportunities followed momentum. A chance meeting at a charity event turned into a consulting offer. A side project became a second income stream. I learned to say no to distractions that didn't align with where I was headed. The city is full of temptationally nights. Fast wins, easy validation. I stopped chasing all of it. One afternoon, months later, ran into someone unexpected. Not her. Someone who had been at the wedding. He congratulated me, not awkwardly, not with pity. With respect, he said he'd been watching from a distance. Said the way I handled everything changed how people talked about me. Reputation travels quietly, but it travels. That night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the street. Taxis slid past. Music drifted up from somewhere below. I realized something then. My comeback wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. Consistency stacked on top of heartbreak until it became strength. Foreshadow. Success invites attention. Not all of it honest. Not all of it new. The message came late. A notification I didn't expect anymore. Her name. A different tone this time. Casual. Almost friendly. She had seen something online. An article. A photo. A mention tied to my work. She said she was glad I was doing well. I stared at the screen and felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. No urge to respond. Just confirmation. That's when it hit me. The comeback wasn't about proving her. It's wrong. It was about proving myself right. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to bed early. Alarm set for 5. Another day to build something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Weeks later, the city hosted a networking gala downtown. A Rise venue. Floor 2 ceiling windows. The kind of event people attend to be seen. I went for business. Nothing more. The room buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking, deals forming in corners. I moved through it calmly, greeting people, listening more than speaking. That's when I saw her across the room. She froze, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. She was dressed well, confident, surrounded by people. But when our eyes met, the balance shifted. I didn't approach. I didn't avoid. I simply continued the conversation I was already in. That choice mattered. Later, as I stepped outside onto the terrace, city lights stretching endlessly below, someone asked me how I stayed so focused after everything I'd been through. I smiled. Clarity, I said. Once you lose what you thought defined you, you get very clear about what actually does. Behind me, through the glass, I felt her presence without turning around. Some stories don't need revisiting. Some endings are strongest when they remain untouched. The city hummed beneath us, and for the first time since that unfinished wedding day, I felt something solid settle in my chest. Freedom. Asterisk. The city looks different when you stop needing it to validate you. Lights become lights. Noise becomes background. Faces blur into motion instead of judgment. That's the quiet power no one warns you about, the moment when your worth stops being negotiated. The gala ended late. I walked home instead of calling a car, letting the night air cool my thoughts. Streetlights stretched my shadow across the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a food truck sizzled, the smell of grilled beef and onions cutting through the concrete air. Normal life? Honest life? I thought back to the altar, not with pain anymore, but with precision. That version of me had been standing there waiting for permission to begin his life, waiting for a signal, waiting for someone else to choose him back. I finally understood the truth I couldn't see then. Love built on fear of loss is already unstable. Commitment without self-respect is a loan with no collateral. Weeks passed after the gala, then months, my calendar filled, not with distractions, but with intention. Meetings that mattered, projects that stretched me. Mornings that began before sunrise and ended with exhaustion, earned the right way. I started mentoring younger guys at work. Nothing dramatic, just quiet guidance. Teaching them how to carry themselves when pressure hits. How to listen more than they talk. How to lose without losing themselves. One afternoon, a mother visited the apartment. She paused in the doorway, taking it in. The cleaner lines. The absence of clutter. The feeling of peace that can't be staged. She hugged me longer than usual. "I worried about you," she admitted. "I know," I said, "but I don't anymore." That meant more than any promotion. Flashback, the night before the wedding. I had stood alone in this same apartment, rehearsing vows in my head. Promises about forever. About choosing each other every day. I smiled at the memory not because it hurt, but because it reminded me how sincere I had been. And sincerity, even when it's misplaced, is never wasted. It becomes experience. Then came the final turn. A mutual acquaintance reached out, asking if I'd be willing to speak on a panel about resilience and leadership. The topic made me pause, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood the responsibility of visibility. When you survive something publicly, people project their own pain onto your recovery. I agreed anyway. The event was packed. Urban professionals. Young men searching for direction. Women listening closely. I spoke plainly. No hero story. No bitterness. Just truth. I talked about trust. About ignoring small warnings because you're invested in an outcome. About the danger of tying your identity to a single relationship. About how discipline saved me when motivation disappeared. About how real comebacks aren't loud, they're consistent. Applause followed, but it felt distant. Afterward, as people filtered out, I saw her again. This time she approached. No crowd. No audience. Just two people standing under fluorescent lights and shared history. She looked different than before, less certain. "More human? I heard you speak," she said. I nodded. She hesitated, then said it. The truth she had probably been carrying for months. Leaving was the worst decision I ever made. Not because I lost you, but because I lost myself after. I studied her face. The honesty was real this time. The regret, too. And here it was, the core moment. The ending people imagined differently. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. And I meant it. She waited. Maybe for anger. Maybe for an invitation. Maybe for the man she left at the altar. He wasn't there. I was. She nodded slowly, understanding landing in her eyes. Then she walked away. No dramatic music. No final words. Just acceptance. I stepped outside into the night, city stretching endlessly in every direction. Cars moved. People laughed. Somewhere, someone was falling in love. Somewhere else, someone was losing it. Life kept circulating. Indifferent, but fair. That's when it fully hit me. She didn't leave me at the altar and ruin my life. She left me at the altar and returned my future. The comeback wasn't revenge. It wasn't. Success, it wasn't proving anything to anyone. It was becoming the kind of man who would never abandon himself again. And that was the real victory.